Welcome to Industrial Design and Prototyping with Bolt. I'm Ben Radcliffe. I'm a Senior Technical Specialist with Unity Technologies. I'm based out of London in the UK. And here's my email address, benra@unity3d.com. And please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Light and Alchemy. So today we're going to look at Bolt. So what is Bolt and how does it work? Well, Bolt is a visual scripting technology. And instead of writing traditional C# code, we're going to learn how to create these nodes, which we call units, and we're going to make connections between these nodes to create interactive things to happen. So we can create interactive experiences and apps. So Bolt is a visual scripting technology. It's great for programmers and it's great for non-programmers alike, whether you're an artist, a designer, or whatnot. And you can use Bolt alone, or you can also use it with traditional C# scripts. And Bolt supports all the traditional things in C# scripting. It supports structs, it supports all class types, and we also have APIs for advanced tasks. And if you want, you can write your own nodes. So what are some good example use cases for Bolt? Obviously, what we're going to do today, we're going to take a look at some rapid prototyping of interactive systems and some asset implementation. But it's also really great if you're a non-coder. It's great for learning C#. If you have some C# experience, it's going to make it all the more easier. But Bolt is great for learning things about variables and flow and just general logic, which you can then apply to C# in your own projects. And it's making scripting and interactivity accessible to, again, artists and designers. So now you're not going to be relying upon the coder on your team. You won't have to wait for him to implement your ideas. You're going to be able to prototype them yourself. And again, this will work with C# code as well. So you can work in conjunction and collaboration with your coders. And you can also package these these will save as assets on disk, and you can save them. You can create a library, and you can share them with other users. There's tons of people sharing things all over the web. And Bolt is primarily for project shipping with Unity 2018 and higher. So you're required to use 2018 and higher. So how do you get Bolt? We're going to run through this in a live demo, but you basically download Bolt from the asset store. So if you want to follow along, go grab that from the asset store now. I'm going to walk you through it, and then you can import Bolt into a new project, and then you run through the Bolt setup wizard, and then you're ready for visual scripting. So we're just going to dive right into a live demo, and I'm going to take you through the whole kit and caboodle. I'll show you how to import Bolt, set Bolt up, set up your interface, how to navigate Bolt UIs. We're going to take a look at flow graphs. We're going to look at state graphs and state machines. We'll also create some variables, and we're going to create a project with some basic interactions. And then at the end, I'll follow up with some resources for you guys to dive into. Great. So let's just dive right into Unity right now. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go to the asset store. If you're in 2019, you can access the asset store directly in Unity. If you're in 2020 and above, you'll have to go to the internet and access it from the web page, but the process is the same. So I just already searched for Bolt. And then right down here, right below this electric lightning bolt, we're going to have Bolt right here, the visual scripting. So I'll click on this, and it'll bring you to this page. We'll scroll down and hit import. And if you don't see this window, you can always go Window, and you can go Asset Store or hit Control 9. So I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to go hit and import. And this will take a few moments. Great. So the thing is, we hit import, and then it goes here. It creates this little tool menu. So that's one little extra step. So you have to go to Tools, Install Bolt. And then it'll decompress that package. And we can go here, and we can hit import. And so this will take a few seconds, and it'll import some assets, and then it'll set up the Bolt. It'll go through the Bolt window, and we'll go through that step by step. And just so you guys know, we'll be doing a live Q&A at the end. So I'm going to run through all of this stuff right now live, and then I'll be hanging out in the chat for a while, and I can answer all your questions. So feel free to put questions in now, but same to the end. So here's our Bolt setup wizard. So you can see, welcome to Bolt. Setup wizard will help you get started. So we'll just go to next. Here's your big option here, the naming scheme. So where do you want to be displayed? We have two options here. We have human naming and we have programmer naming. So we can see transform, get position, where over here it's a little bit more like C#, where it's transform.position get. If you're new to coding, I recommend you go to human naming. If you're an experienced C# developer, go ahead and go program naming. They're both going to have the same functionality. It's really just about the interface. And I think it's a little over here, it's a little bit more explanatory to new people. So instead of things like int or bools, you'll see integer and booleans. So I'm going to go for today, I'm going to go on here. And here's all our assembly options. We can go ahead with the defaults. This is for adding additional assemblies. And a good example of that would be TextMesh Pro. But we're going to go with the default, and don't worry, if you need to get something later, you can always go and add something. It's not permanent. So go next, and here's all our type options, and these are all the types we have available. And some examples of that is object, Boolean, integer, float string, vector2, vector3, all the usual stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and say generate, and this is going to go ahead and install Bolt for us. Magic, and then we're good. So we can just go ahead and hit close, and now we have Bolt. So I've gone ahead and I made a little scene here. So just to run you through what I set up ahead of time is I've set up this. My colleague Jerome was nice enough to export this brake pad assembly out of Pixies. So this is some CAD data that he exported for me into Unity. So I put this in here. I have a little animation on here, as you can see. I've made some animation clips. So I put is closed, is closing, is opening. You can see here. So we're going to go ahead and put some interactivity to create an exploded view of this later. I just want to let you see that I have that. I put this little chrome sphere in here. I'm going to use that as a UI element. And I put this collection of HDRIs in here. And I just went through, we're using HDRP in 2019.4. And I went and I put some volumes. And I assigned a visual environment, an HDRI sky, and an exposure. In each one, I have a different HDRI. And these are the HDRIs from the Unity HDRI pack, that these are also available in the asset store. So you can go to the Unity asset store and just search HDRI and Unity. And I have them turned off. And you can see here, we're going to go through, and this is what I've set up today. We're going to be able to go through, and we're going to create an interactive visualization. We're going to be able to spin this around, create some interactivity. So it's going to be an interactive turntable. We'll spin that around. We'll be able to change the lighting environment, and we'll be able to activate the animation. So we can go from a traditional view to an exploded view, and we'll do that interactively. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for now. So when you start with Bolt, so we've got our project here. Everything's looking good. Let's go here. Just going to frame that so we can rotate around this piece. And one more little thing is I did put a collider on here. I put a box collider on here. So we have something to click on. So first thing we do with Bolt is Bolt has 3 windows. We want to go here to Window. We want to grab the graph inspector, and the variable windows. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to create that here. And I'm just going to drag this down here. I'm with the default view. I like this view. I'm going to grab the graph window here. I'm going to drag it here. This is where we're going to work with all our units and nodes. I'm going to grab the graph inspector, and I'm going to drag that guy over here. I want this over by the actual inspector. Let me drag it at the bottom of the inspector here. And this is where it's just like the traditional inspector, but it's more based on information on the nodes. And then I'm going to grab the third window, the variables. So it's graph inspector, variables. So I'm going to drag that little guy right here. So this is our little working setup. So I'm just going to go to my layout and save. And I saved a little layout here. I already have one saved, but I'll save now. Unite now _ Bolt, and in all capital letters, live. So you know that I'm live and this isn't pre-recorded. Great. So this is what we need to get working. And again, this is where we're going to do all our work. This is where we're going to create our variables. And this is what's going to give our information on our node. So let's go. The first thing we want to do, let's create a graph. So I'm going to click on the object I want to create a graph on, and it's going to be this brake assembly here. So just like a traditional Unity component, I'm going to click Add Component. And you can see right here, we have this little Bolt menu. So I'm going to click on Bolt. We have a couple options here. We have flow machine, state machine, and variables. And we also have listeners. We're not going to go into that today. We're going to focus on these. So I'm going to create a flow machine. Boom. So flow machine is a component. You can see it adds it right here, and it also adds this variable component. So flow machine is kind of like the component that reads the graphs that we create. And we have 2 options. We can create an embedded macro where the graph itself lives right on the asset and it lives in this component, Or what we can do is create a macro, and we'll switch that. And what a macro will do is it'll actually create an asset on disk that we can save and we can share. So if we want a graph that's reusable on multiple objects, we would want to create a macro. Now, embed has a few advantages. It allows you to access objects in the hierarchy directly without creating variables, but we'll show that in the state machine. So for our flow machine, we're going to head and we're going to create a flow machine and a macro. So I'm going to create a new graph. I'm going to say new. So it's going to open up my Asset Explorer here, and I'm going to go and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it Bolt Macros. Ooh, I got to spell right. I get chubby fingers. So Bolt Macros. I'll click in here and I'll say rotate Y. And I'll save that macro here. And it'll just like a normal Unity asset, it'll save here. And I want to say another way, you can third mouse button and go create Bolt and create macros here as well. I tend to create them on the object. So let's go back to our flow graph. So this is our main working area, and you can see it creates two graphs right off the get-go, a start event and an update event. So just like in Unity, if you're familiar with scripting, C# scripting and mono behaviors, it'll create a start and an update. So this is our flow graph, and you can see middle mouse button, we can drag it around like most things. Middle mouse wheel, we can scroll in and out. We have a little zoom here, which is great. And to select graphs, you just click on them and move them around. To deselect, you just click away. So I'm going to click on this, and now let's look at our inspector. You can see the graph inspector gives information on our units. So you can see this is a start unit, and it's called the first time a machine is enabled before any update methods. And the inspector will give you information on both the inputs and the outputs. So you can see the output here is just a flow trigger. So again, start. This will be an action that'll happen just once the application starts. An update, you can see, called every frame. So let's do an example of this real quick. So before we get into variables, I'm just going to create a basic rotate. So we want to use what we call the fuzzy finder in Bolt. We third mouse button, click, and you can see here's how we access all our units. And they're nodes, but we call them units. And so we can go through, we can access through the hierarchy, or we can just search for things. So I'm just going to say, I want to make this thing rotate. I'm going to search for rotate, and then we go rotate on Y. And most of the time, to be honest, what's great about Bolt is we're using the human naming, so I can just think about things I want to do, and I usually just search for that and find an equivalent. So we have a rotate node. So the first thing we want to do is connect nodes. This is what's called our little flow, our flow output, and we're going to put this into the flow input. So actually, let me third mouse button, and we'll look at this in the graph inspector, and see we have our rotate, and we have the inputs. You can see these little inputs right here. And you can see input for flow, input for target, X angle, Y angle, and exit flow. I like to think about these little event units, these green event units, like start. I like to think of them as like power sources. And this is kind of like the wire connecting the power. So let's go as an example here, and I'll type 45 degrees. So when I go into here and I hit play, it'll rotate at 45 degrees. Boom, and you can see just once, just when it starts. Ooh, is that working? Ooh, it opened. So what we need to do is we want to basically put some controls behind this. And you can see that on start, it rotates 45 degrees. The cool thing about Bolt is you can edit these at runtime. So I don't need to stop, redo the graph, and then do it again. I can do all this stuff at runtime, and then it'll save those changes. So instead of start, I can do every frame. And actually, one thing to connect these, I didn't disconnect the first one. You just third mouse button and it'll delete that connection. And this is another great point. Notice how this grays out. We have this great little dim thing in our menu. And that'll tell me, like, I have a node, but it doesn't really have a purpose. So it's not doing anything. So it'll dim if it's not doing anything. So now let's create a connection here. And we say update. So now it's rotating 45 degrees every frame. So we don't want to do that. So here's the other thing. We can type right in here while it's live and it's spinning. But this is where variables come in. We don't want to, every time we want to change the speed of the spinning, we don't want to have to go into the graph and type a variable. So we want to create a variable for this. So here's what we'll do now. We'll go over to our variable, We have update here. Let's create a variable so we can control the speed of our object. And here's our variable menu. And we have different tabs here. We have graph, object, scene, app, and saved. These are basically the scope of the variables. Is this variable accessible just within this graph? Or is this variable attached to this object? Is it accessible through the entire scene? And is it accessible through the entire app across multiple scenes? And then we have this last one saved, and that's for persistent data. Say, for example, we wanted to save some data out to disk, and an example in a game would be a high score. Like a traditional thing, I want to access this on the object. And this is one thing here as well. When we created this, it created this variables right here. So we can create a variable here, an object, or we can create it here. I'm going to create it down here, and I'm just going to type speed. And this is one thing. You want to go hit the plus, but then I'll give you a little error. So you really want to type, this is one thing that always gets me and give you a little red error. You type the name of the variable first. So I'm going to call it speed. And then I'm going to hit plus. And then you can pick the type. So we have floats, which is, a decimal, integer, which is a whole number, string, which is words, boolean, which is true and false. And you can create things like vector3, which is 3 numbers, or game objects. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to make an integer. And then I can say 45 is my initial value. And then to get this in here, you just drag and drop it. So I can just drag it from here. And now here's my variable. And you can see here, it gives me the same thing. It updates together. So now I want to pump this speed into here. Let's click on this. And let's click on our graph inspector here. And you can see get variable gets the value of a variable. And it has a couple inputs for string, the name, and the game object. And since we're working on this here, this is where we're applying it to self. So this is for this object. So we don't need to apply another game object. But if I want to apply it, I could create a variable and point it to that. And then the output. So it's the value. So this is our flow. This, again, is like our power source. And this is I'm taking that value and I'm pumping it right into here. So again, we can hit the play. And anything that happens at runtime in the graph inspector is persistent. But if, for example, if I slow this down, I'll have to go readjust that just like a regular Unity variable. So now we have this going on variable and it's going on update. We've seen start, we've seen update and variable. Let's add some consistency to this thing. So for those Unity programmers, frame rate is going up and down. It's 120 frames a second. It's 60 frames a second. So we can add some consistency and some smoothness to this. So in a traditional Unity script, we would add like a time.delta time. Here we have a lot of cool stuff in Bolt, and it's like per second. So I'm going to add a per second node. I can just put this here. And again, while this is live, I'm just going to grab this here, and I'm going to grab that there. And you can see now it's per second. And because it's going per second, it's a little bit more consistent. Let's speed this back up to 45. Great. So that's a nice rotation. So I don't want it to update all the time. I want to look at a different event. So let's try a different event. So this is updating every frame. I want it to only rotate when my mouse is over this. So I'll go here to our fuzzy finder. I'll go add unit, and I'll go into events. This is kind of like I said, like I think of it as like the power source. We'll go to events and we'll go on input. And just like Unity, like messages in Unity, we have on mouse down, on click, all that stuff. So I'm going to go with on mouse over. And then I'm just going to grab this here and I'm going to connect it here. And this is one interesting thing. We'll look at this in a bit. You can have multiple events. So I can have it, on spacebar, on mouse over. So I can have multiple events, but I'm going to delete those here. So now when I'm in this window, when my mouse hovers over that, it'll rotate. And this is what's great about Bolt. Notice you can see the flow. So again, I think of this as the power source, and you can see the flow of everything. So as I put my mouse over, I have to click in the window. You can see that the power goes on, mouse off, the power stops. Great. So that's a simple flow graph. And let's do one more thing. I'm just going to go for organization. You can control and drag, and you can create backdrops here. So I'm going to say rotate Y. And then you can see on here in the inspector, I can give it a color. So I'm just going to give it a green. It's like a green for go. Great, so that's an example, and that's now saved to disk. We have this in our project, and we have this in our bolt macros. And we could reuse that on multiple objects, and we would have to give each object its own variable. Therefore, we can control the speed for variables differently. So we'll come back to flow graphs in a bit. I want to do another type of graph, and I'm going to demo that on this. I'm going to use this Chrome sphere. I'm going to place this on the Chrome sphere, and I'm basically using the Chrome sphere as just a UI element. So again, I'm going to go here. I'm going to say add component, and I'm going to say bolt, and I'm going to add a state machine. And this time, I'm going to actually use an embed state machine. I'm not going to reuse this, and it's going to live only on this object. And I don't want to create some extra variables. I want to be able to grab some things from here. And you see right off the bat, it creates this here. So we have different things. We have a flow state, a super state, any state, and a collection. And I'll create these real quick. And what you can see here is any state. We're going to work today with just a flow state. And what that means, it's basically a flow graph within a state machine. So we can create multiple states. And a super state is a state machine within a state machine. It's nested. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking inception. It's like state machine inception. And this state machine is from any state, so you can activate things. And basically what you want to do is you want to create multiple things and put transitions between them. Someone really explained it to me in a really great way. A state machine is, if you think of like a ceiling fan with like a chain pull, and it has 3 different modes. It has a slow speed, a medium speed, and a fast speed. And every time you pull that chain, you make a transition. So that's what we're really going to do. We're going to create a flow machine inside here, and then we're going to have a little trigger to go to the next flow machine. So I'm going to delete these here, and we're not going to go over these today. We're going to stay here. So what I want to do is I want to basically activate and deactivate these lighting environments. So the first thing I want to do is I want to give this a better name than start. So I'll call this over here in our graph inspector. I can give it a name and I can give it a description. Let's say HDRI here and say initial, let's say HDRI Geralt is the name of it. Geralt. I'm spelling this wrong, but that's okay. And you can see it gives a little description here. And one thing about this, you can toggle these as the start state on and off. So let's toggle this off for now, because I'm going to make some duplicates of this and I don't want them all to be start states. And I'll show you what that means in a moment. So to go inside, we navigate, we double click on it. So now we're inside our HDRI, we're inside our start state. And you can see it creates 3 nodes for us right here. It creates the on enter state, the update, just like last time, and the on exit state. And I'm going to do this. I think this is a really clear example of how to do this. So all I want to do is I want to turn this on and I want to turn this off. All I want to do is activate that checkbox. And for those who use Unity, that's just set active and deactive. So I'm going to go to my fuzzy finder here, and I'm just going to search. I'm going to say set active. So game object set active, boom, that's all I want to do. And it gives me everything. I can turn it on, I can turn it off. So I'm going to say when we enter this state, this is the first pull of that chain or the initial state, we want to turn this on. I'm going to delete this update. We're not going to use this. And so one thing now is this embedded graph state machine is living on the sphere. So we want to do this. We want to activate this Garo HDRI. And this is where the embedded graph comes in well, because I can just drag and drop this in here now. So that's super easy. Where before, if I was to create, and this is a graph, I would have to go and create a graph macro, and I could go here and I could say HDRI A, and I would have to create a variable, and I would have to say game object, and I would have to drag and drop that here. And you can do the same thing, but you just have to go through this extra step. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to do the extra step. I'm lazy. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So I can just duplicate this here and copy and paste. And I'm say, when we go in, we turn it on, and we exit, we turn it off. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this 3 more times. So I'm going to do one more thing as well, just because we're going to get lazy. I'm going to create a unit. I'm going to say, create a game object unit. And you'll see why this will be clever in a moment. where instead of dragging and dropping that here, I'm going to feed this into here, and I'm going to feed this into here, and I'll just drag and drop it here. So this is all we're doing. It's super simple. We go in, we check this checkbox, we go out, we uncheck that checkbox. So now we want to navigate back and create another state. So we just click on this Chrome sphere, and we just navigate here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste this guy twice. So I'll paste it here, and I'll call this HDRI B, and I'll call this HDRI C, and I won't go update the notes. Well, maybe I should update the notes. I'll do best practices. Let's go HDRI Kirby Cove, and let's go here and say HDRI Muirwood. Let's go here, and we'll go Muirwood. Great, and now I just need to create some transitions between these. So what is that string pull like on the fan? So I third mouse button and say make transition. So I'm going to go do this clockwise. You can do it in any organization, but just for simplicity today, I'll just make another transition here, and then I'll make a third transition. Make transition. Oh, when I did a transition to a transition, we got transition at inception. So make transition. Boom. So now we'll start off. We can start off. We need to pick one as a start. I'll pick B just so it's a little as a start, and you can pick any one. I could say, let's start with A. Well, and I saved my graph, so let's go back to our graph live. Boom. And let's click on our Chrome sphere. There we go, happy accidents. And then we'll toggle this as start. So now I need a condition inside this transition for this transition to happen. So I'm gonna double click here, and you can see all we just needed is an event to trigger the transition. So again, we'll go back to our fuzzy finder, and I'll go to events, and I'll go input. And I'm just going to say on mouse down. So I have right now, I have mouse hover over will spin, and on mouse down will activate the transition. And I'm going to copy and paste this. And again, I'm going to navigate back, and I'll just quickly paste this in here, and I'll connect it. You can see the dimming is on. And now that it has a purpose, it's now undimmed. And we'll look in this one, and you can see here, and out here, you can see here that it's got a little different icon. This is a little mouse click on it, so we know it has a function. And this is an arrow, so it needs something. So we click in here, and I'll just paste that again. Let's go, or I'll just create it for the fuzzy finder. And again, we'll go events. And you can just search too. Sometimes I'll just search mouse. Then you can see all the different options here. So we say on mouse down, and connect that here. So now we have a full state machine. So let's go ahead and hit play and see if it works. Cross your fingers, we're live. All right. So you can see right off the bat, it enters that first state. So here we go, we're live, and we can hover over this, and we rotate. So that's the working. So now let's click on this, and you can see it did that little electric pulse, and we're still on the same thing. Oh, happy accident, we didn't change it. I forgot to change it here. So we copied and pasted, but we didn't actually update the internals. All right, you guys get to learn from my mistakes. So we didn't update this game object. So it was switching, but it was still staying on A. So I'm going to drag that here. And then I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to drag C here. And you can see I have a bunch of them. So you can make this as complex as you want. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And let's close this out for a little clarity. And open this window, and I'm going to hit play again. All right. So we have here, we hover over, mouse connect, and now click on this, and you can see that we've changed the state. So now we're in HDRB, we click again, we're in HDRC, we click again, and we go around and around the circle, and we can add as many of these as we like. So I've just added the 3 for now. Cool, let's do one more thing. So now we've made a state machine. We've looked at the difference between a flow machine, a flow graph, a state machine, a state graph. We've looked at embedded macros. So let's get crazy. Let's look at some complex logic. I want to show you to do one more thing. So we want to activate and deactivate this animation. So let's take a look at what I've got set up here. So we've set up, I showed you in the animator, we've set up 4 animation cycles, and we have a basic animator graph. So you can see here, I've got this little checkbox checked is open. So I'm going to uncheck that now. So when we load, this will actually just start, and it'll start in a closed state. I have 4 animations, is closed, and all this is I keyframed it in its default state. And then I have is open, and I put a little bool here. If you're familiar with animators, you create 4 different animation cycles. One is opening, which I showed earlier. One is open, one is closing, and one is closed. And all I really did is I just grabbed some of the parts and I keyframed them on Y, and I grabbed some of the parts and I keyframed them on Z. But I've set up transitions here. If you go, this is a type of state machine as well. So if this is true, it allows you to do a transition just like in our state machine here. So as I click open, it'll go into open. And when I make that true, it'll be open. And when I unclick it, it'll be false. So we can go around the whole thing. And basically what we want to do is we want to create a graph that basically activates and deactivates this state machine here. So let's take a look at what we got. So I'm going to go back to my break. I could add another, I could keep adding logic in here, but one other thing, you can have as many flow machines and graphs on this as you'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and add another component, and I'm going to add another flow machine, and I'm going to make that, I'm going to keep it a macro as well, because maybe I want to reuse it. And I'll say new, and I'll go into bolt macros, and I'll save, I'll call it activate animation. Boom. And again, we have our event and we have our stuff. And I'm going to create some logic here. So what do I want to do? In the end, I want to activate and deactivate that bool. So I'm going to go, just for the sake of the graph, I'm going to create a variable. Oh, I did that again. I'm just going to call it something simple. I'm going to call it my bool. And this is going to be more, we're going to do this like a really verbose way, because I'll touch on some points and then we'll simplify it. So create a my bool, and I'll create a variable of type boolean, and then we can drag that in here for access later. Or you know what, we'll delete that and we'll drag that in later. So ultimately, I want to set a variable. I want to set this value here true and untrue, and ultimately I want to make that true and untrue. So we're basically going to learn basic logic of on and off. So essentially, I want to say add unit, and I can say set variable, and this is how we access variables and how we set values. So I want to set, I've got to set as a graph variable. So I'll say set graph variable. And you see I have this set graph variable, and I can pick between flow, and I can change this at any time. So I'm just going to pick my bool. And I want to do something to it. I need to give it a value. So let's look at this in the graph inspector. And this tells us everything we need to know. It is inputs for flow. So we need to, an event, to give it some juice. And we have the name, and this is the name of the variable, and then we need to give it a value. So we need to give it a checkbox value, a true. So we can add another unit here, and I can say Boolean. And this is where the naming conventions come in, the human naming. So we'll say Boolean literal, and I want to make this checkbox checked. So this is the ultimate value I want to give it. Just like before we gave it a speed, we want to give it a true value. So we can just say at start, I can just hit play, and it'll give it a true value. And watch, we can look at this little checkbox here. We're not actually communicating with this yet. We're going to do a demonstration of logic. But you can see here, now I've given that true. So what if I wanted to give it false? I mean, realistically, I could just grab this whole thing. I mean, I could just check this here. Well, actually, now this is only going at start time. So I would have to give it another. And I can copy and paste this. And let's go here and let's create another set of this. And I'm going to say, if I want to make it false, I have to give that some juice. If I want to make it true, I need to give that some power. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to explore some logic of basically how do you toggle things on and off. So I'm going to delete that real quick. And I'm going to add a couple more conditions to this, because I want to show you a few more things. So let's go add unit, and let's put a key input to this. So let's go get key. And so we can get key commands in here. Oh, yep. And so we have input, get key, any, get key up, get key down. So I'm going to say input, get key. Do I want to go down or up? Let's go, I'm going to say get key up. I don't see that here. There we go. I like to do it so when you release the key. And so this is another thing, and I can connect this to my update. So let's take a look at this here. I'm going to deactivate that real quick as another demo. So we need to give this an event. So update, do every frame. And see, it's flowing now. So now I go here and I need to give it space. So if I want to carry that flow, I need to put it here. But we also want to do one more thing. So this is a Boolean right here. You can see it's the same color. And we can click on our inspector and it say exit flow result Boolean. So when I hit space, it's going to output that. Is it true or false out of here? This is what input get key does. So we need a branch as well. And this is how we do branch logic, like if and then statements in C#. So I can just connect this on two levels. I'm going to pass this the flow, and I'm going to pass the value. So I'm going to say here, if this is true, if I hit the space key, make that checkbox. So I can click here, and you see it put that little flow, and I can uncheck it again and go here, and I hit space bar, and I'm in the window here. You can see it flow, and it does that checkbox. Okay, so ultimately, how do I affect this animation that's playing right now? Well, there's other things I can do. I can say set bool. I can set the animator bool. All this stuff is built in. So I can say animator, set name, and set value. So I can push this through the flow. I can type the name in here. So I can say is open. And then I can just take that value and pass it right from here. So now we've made some complex logic. We've done a few things. So we'll go over here, and again, I hover over, it rotates, I click, it changes the lighting. All right, let's make sure this works. We hit spacebar, and boom. All right, we've opened up our animation. So now it rotates. That's feeling good. Let's manually uncheck that. Let's try that one more time. Let's manually uncheck that. And let's go. We're rotating. We're rotating. I'm hitting the spacebar. You can't see my hand. I show you what happened. You see the flow, and boom. All right, so now how do we switch back and forth between these two? So I'm going to create another copy of this real quick. I'm going to create this set bool here, and I'm just going to adjust this to here. And again, I'm kind of doing this the long, hard way. It's more to show you that you can create complex logic. Is I need to create another branch node to say, am I going one way? Am I taking the high road? Or am I taking the low road? So I'll go here, and I'll add another branch. And so we want to connect the flow of the branch here, one for true, one for false here, and then we'll connect this guy right here. Okay, so we're connecting this, but so we need to compare this to something, and this is where logic comes in. So I wanted to make it the opposite of what I have. So I'm going to go here and grab this my bool, and I'm going to drag that in here. So what this is going to do is it's going to check this logic, and it's going to say, if I'm holding down, it's giving it power. If I'm holding down the space bar, once I key it up, it's going to shoot a little true through here. It's going to give it some juice. And if it matches, so with basic logic, two trues equal a true, and a true and a false equal a false. So if this is false, I want to make it true. So it's going to go and check. And I think I've done this opposite, but it'll be okay because it'll work the first time. So here we go. I think it's going to work. So I'm going to uncheck that real quick. And see here, again, it's all still working. And we're still at runtime, which is great. But I'm going to go ahead after this. I'm going to lose that variable, I think. And then I'm going to go and do a simpler version. So you can see, again, I can click here. And then I hit space, and it opens. And you can see how it's going. You can see the path it's flowing down here, which this is what's really powerful about Bolt, is I can see that logic in action. So I hit space again, and it closes. And you can see it flows to here, and it opens. And it flows again. And this is what's really powerful about Bolt, is you can really see the flow of that logic and if it's working or not. You know, like when I do C#, I'm always writing like debug.logs to see if something's working. Where here you can just see, do the dots flow. So that's pretty powerful. So in 40 minutes, we've made a completely interactive turntable. But let's clean this up and do one more thing. I don't want to do it on branch, and I don't want to do it on key. I want to do it on click. So I can get rid of all this, and I can create another event, and I can say events. I'll go to my inputs, and I'll say, on mouse down. So just like I did on mouse down in there, I can do that. So now we have this logic here. And so we're going to click in the window to activate it, and it's closed. And I click. And now it's switching between true and false, open and close. And it's that simple. And it's pretty powerful. So, all right, that's crazy. Let's stop. And, we've got all our changes because we worked here. But you know what? I'm going to delete everything. We don't need any of this. And I think this is what's really cool about Bolt is we don't need any of this stuff because you can create your own macros, and Bolt has a lot of smart stuff already. And we'll delete this guy here. And Bolt, actually, what are we doing? We're toggling true and false. Bolt actually has a toggle. So it has a toggle flow, which does everything I just did for you. So we could have did this whole demo in 15 minutes. And we could have made this whole thing, but we need to connect this. So you can see toggle flow, and it's a complex. It has a lot of ins and a lot of outs. And that's where the graph inspector is really important. And you can start it on or start it off. I'm going to say we want to start it off because we're starting it off there. And you can see we want to enter a flow. And basically we want to enter a value. So I just have to enter this flow right in here into this toggle. And then I just basically have to say, I can put multiple flows into it. So when it's on and off, it'll both flow into this graph, and it'll still do something like, again, this is the power source, but it's also going to pass a value for me, which is really great. So everyone cross your fingers. Here's the final moment. We've done it in 3. We've basically made an entire interactive experience, if you think about it, in about 5 different nodes. So we go here, and we click, and it opens. And you go click again. You can see it's activating and deactivating based upon this name. And then we can switch everything. And you can control here. These are just controls I did. I thought the on mouse over and the mouse click was easy for you guys to view and follow along. But I've done more advanced things. Instead of doing logic through here, I've actually gone and done like interactive turntables with characters, and I've activated motion cycles. You can change, you can put another interface over here, and you can work with UIs and buttons, and you can change the materials. This is pretty much all the logic you need. All you need is flow machines and flow graphs, state machines and state graphs, and some variables, and you can create pretty much anything. And again, you can see you can pretty much, if you use human naming, you can just, on the fuzzy finder, search for what you guys want to do. And then you can build this and you deploy it to the web. I built a version of it. I put it in the cloud, and I've been streaming it. It's really fun. But that's everything. Cool. So I think that's about time. Let's hang out and do some questions. There's some helpful resources. So if you guys want to follow up on this, you guys can go check out the Bolt documentation. There's a series of templates that people made that you can package all this stuff up. So I can package this template up and say, product rotator, product configurator, and I can stick it on the asset store, or I could share it with my team. So there's tons of resources, Bolt samples. We made some nice stuff. This video will be available later. But again, we put little bit.ly things. So Unity Bolt docs, Unity Bolt kits, and Bolt samples. Great. So I guess it's time for questions. How many of you guys are still with me and have some questions? I'm going to be looking in the chat. Let's just do the questions in the chat. Cool. I'm yours, guys, for the next 15 minutes, so you can ask me anything. It's 2 state machines activated at the same time. What I've been doing is so the question is, in the chat, if you guys can't read it, with a state machine, would it be possible to have 2 states activated at the same time? I've actually not tried. I assume is the condition. Yes, it would be actually. No, I've definitely done it as a mistake because I've done it and I've too many start things, and I have activated multiple at the same time. So yeah, and you can also have state machines within state machines with supergraphs, which is a little bit more advanced. But what I was doing with that, a state machine within a state machine, was activating the HDRI and then doing rotations on the HDRI. So it was a subset of per HDRI. I was doing a state machine for each HDRI. What projects in Unity are currently integrating Bolt? All my projects. I think everything we're doing. I think, we're all very excited about Bolt. I'm working on a whole content campaign for next year, and I'm integrating Bolt in everything I do. I think the accessibility is amazing. My whole team is excited about it. We've all wanted it for a long time. So you're going to see a 2021 full of everyone using Bolt for everything, if that answers your question. Or what products? I think Bolt I don't know as far as a product. I mean, it's for integration in Unity and Unity Pro. It's in all the Unity, all the Unity packages, free and paid. And it's available for the asset store for free. As far as integration, other projects built upon it, I'm not sure. Is it possible for Bolt to extract metadata from objects? I assume so. We do have the API, so you can write custom nodes and get, create custom data. I've not tried to do it from Reflect, but please, you've got my email address, benra@unity3d. I'll type it again in the chat for you guys. And if you need help me to direct you, I can direct you to one of my colleagues who uses Reflect more than me, and they can give you a specific answer. But I'm assuming so. But never make assumptions. Is Bolt compatible with Mars? Yes. Yeah, it's definitely compatible with Mars. I'm doing a lot. I'm using it. That's what I'm using it for, actually, is I'm doing a lot of XR stuff. And it's usable in anywhere you would traditionally use C# code. In any way you want to make an interaction. How Bolt connects with some of the Mars functions, I'm not sure. But if you wanted to create basic interactions, like I did a AR thing in AR Foundation last week, where I set up I did a character in the environment, and I put all the animation cycles all linked together, basically like I showed you with the graph opening and closing. I did that with more complex animation cycles, and I used the state graph to do that. And it took me 4 minutes as opposed to taking me 20 minutes writing it and typing it. That's a good question too. You guys are asking me tough questions. Are there nodes for reading live data from web sources? Again, I've never specifically done that, but if you follow up with me, I believe I can find you some information. But I can't see why not. It can basically access anything. And if it can't, what you can do is you can access that live data with a traditional C# script, and then that Bolt can talk to that C#. But I think through our Node API, you'll be able to do that. What are you looking to do, Tom Connolly? That's a great question. If you ping me a use case, I'll be happy to turn it over to the Unity Hive mind and see if I can get one of my smarter colleagues to give you an answer. You're a data viz guy. Okay. Yeah, that's some interesting stuff. You can access the data through Bolt and then pump it over to. I've been working with a lot of data viz guys doing really crazy things with visual effects graph. But yeah, I believe you should. Don't see why you wouldn't be able to. If there wasn't a node available, you should be able to write your own node with our API. And again, if not, just have a C# grab that data a traditional manner and just have the Bolt talk to the C#. Can you export Bolt into C#? And no, you cannot do that. I knew that question was going to come. No, the graphs they live as graphs, so they live as assets. So there's no real clean way to convert them to code these days. I think we're looking at it, but no. Houdini. Yeah, that's a great combo, especially when you start to combine. So Tom Connolly put in the chat that he saw Simon Russell's work with DataViz and Houdini, and now I'm inspired. We're talking to a lot of Houdini people now, and I think that's a really powerful combination. I think the traditional mode would be to go from a CAD package or a DCC like a Maya or a Blender into Unity, and I think we're starting to see that collaboration between Houdini, which is very powerful software. My background is actually visual effects, and we use Houdini to do very complex simulations. And I think that combination of grabbing that data from Houdini, passing it into Unity, and we do have a tight integration, and there's some stuff on our asset store, and there's a Houdini package to integrate Unity and Houdini closely together. But we're always looking at closer and tighter integration with those guys. I didn't check who was here that I recognize a lot of names here. Thank you guys for joining again. Thank you for always joining and supporting my presentations. And always, please feel free to ping me if there's anything you'd like to see that I'm not covering. I'm doing a lot of webinars and community activities this year and next year. So I'd love some feedback of what you guys would like to see. So yeah, and I'd love feedback. I'm going to be doing Bolt as much as possible. Today was a beginner session. I kind of really wanted to just demonstrate the core fundamentals for you guys. But I'd love to do more advanced stuff, whether it be this year or next year. So I'd love to know. I think you guys had some great questions today, which has some great feedback. And also check our Unity YouTube channel. My colleague Ashley has done some amazing presentations in Bolt, and my deck, I'm stealing a lot from her because her stuff is so amazing. But we're doing more and more Bolts this year and next year. Yes, you can. There's a full API, so you can write and extend and write custom nodes. So basically, you can extend it as much as you'd like with our API. I've not done anything with it yet. I'm still pretty new to Bolt as well in the past few months, but there's a lot of people writing a lot of custom nodes and doing amazing things with it. Oh, and the question was, can you extend Bolt with C# code to extend assets? Yes. What projects? Oh, James McKay. James, you come to all my stuff. James, come to my Digital Developer Day on the 3rd. So what am I working on personally? So I'm working on a short time project called, I'm really focusing on storytelling. So you've been coming to some of my stuff. So I built 4 characters. I don't know if you've seen a peek. I've been kind of peeking at them, but and if you've seen my Twitter, I've got a motion capture suit and a virtual camera production rig. So I built 4 characters in 4 environments. So I'm gonna do some interactive, real-time storytelling for 2021. So I'm gonna do as much as possible. I'll be announcing it pretty soon, but I've got a monthly cadence of topics. We're gonna go through the whole deep dive into everything in 2021. Virtual production, face cap, animation, layout, rigging, texturing, real-time lighting. So I've got a whole plan, and we're going to spend 9 months from January to September diving into each one deeply. And I'm going to be doing webinars. I'll be doing live learn sessions on our EDU platform. And yeah, I think for 2021, I want to help everyone create their interactive experience, tell their story. And Bolt is a huge thing with this. I've been doing this with XR Interaction Toolkit. I've been, creating interactions. So, you can walk and set triggers and do all kinds of interesting stuff in VR environments. So yeah, all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm going to be premiering a little bit on December 4th. I'm going to be doing a Bolt thing there. I'm going to be using my characters from my project in 2021. So keep tuned, James. I know you come to everything. I'm always happy to have you. Moral support. Is it possible to use version control with Bolt? Yes. Bolt is an asset that lives in the project directory. So you'll be able to check it in and out with a version control system, just like any other asset. You're not going to be able to diff them, right? Like you're not going to be able to go like git and diff and like you would with traditional text and code. But as far as version control is checking in and checking out, grabbing the latest, yeah, it's a physical asset on disk. So you would do that just like any other asset. All right, well, guys, I think that's the result of our time. But yeah, thank you very much for joining. I had a blast. I hope you guys had a blast. Thank you very much. And check back. This video will be live soon. It'll be live on YouTube and it'll be live on Unite Now. So in the meantime, thank you for joining and feel free to reach out to me, Twitter, Instagram at Light and Alchemy.